This is The Express with Gary Allen, your
tonight's
360-degree view of the world.
I'm sorry.
Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
Been, held back by a little bit of problem here on my end with the computer. It's been down, but I'm looking forward to being back with you. And, of course, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your time here. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and welcome to tonight's show. This is Gary Allen with The Express, and thank you very much for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here tonight. I'm certainly happy to have you back listening with us. We've been having some problems on my end for the last couple of weeks, which is the reason why we've been doing some repeat shows. But tonight I think we have a very interesting show for us. Our guest for tonight, I would first of all like to say to EW, who is back in the control room running things. EW, tell everybody a little about the fundraising that we're trying to do to get this thing on television.
Oh, well, it's actually an awesome deal we've got going on. If people are familiar with Austin City Limits on PBS, we've got an opportunity with PBS as well to create our own version with our independent artists that we have on TMV as well. And so what we're doing is what we're calling the dollar campaign. Pretty much if all our listeners pitched in $1, we would have more than enough to make this campaign work. And it's putting together the funding to create our own version of Austin City Limits. There is a name for it, but because of the secrecy to it, we can't actually give you the name yet. But what it is we have our version of that where we will have the indie artists performing in front of crowds filmed for PBS to be presented to you guys live on the air or filmed as well. Not all of them will be live, but it will be that. So simply just go to the TMV Cafe homepage and make your donation there. Now, you are welcome to give more than $1, but, if everyone out there listening gave $1, we would be there right now today.
Exactly. And for all of you out there, I just want to say please contribute as you can. EW is working his butt off for all of us here at this station, and we certainly are happy to have him with us. And speaking of having to have someone with us tonight, this is an unusual show. The gentleman that I'm about to introduce to you has been a friend of mine for a little while now, and he's one of the most extraordinary and bravest gentlemen that I have ever come across in my life. For reasons of secrecy, we will refer to him as AJ. He is a linguist with one of the top security agencies, intelligence agencies in the United States. This is the story of a 16-year-old boy, and the name of the book is Twice Under the Persian Sky. This is the story of a 6-year-old young man who left the United States a citizen, went to Iran with his mother and father, and for the next 10 years planned his escape, and at the age of 16, he implemented that escape. The story is about him. It's a true story about him and his family living a repressive regime of Ayatollah Khomeini. And AJ, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here tonight on The Express and to talk about this wonderful, brilliant book of your escape and the trials and tribulations thereof and how you became a member of one of the top intelligence agencies today in the United States, and at 19 years old, how you were recruited by them. So, AJ, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Gary.
It's my pleasure.
Okay. Well, my parents came to this country back in 1969. My dad was pursuing his engineering degree. And so I was fortunate enough to be born in the United States in the early 70s. And my father is the oldest son. And Middle Eastern cultures, the oldest son is responsible for taking care of the family. My grandfather, his dad, ended up getting cancer in the late 70s. And that's when the entire revolution, of course, happened. For those who know the Iranian history, 78, 79 is when everything really went bad. Anyway, they had to move back. I was only 6 years old. In 1980, and we went back. I could speak Farsi because my parents spoke to me, but I couldn't read and write. And for the next 9 years, from 1980 to 1989, I got to experience life as an Iranian, really. an American Iranian, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn Farsi, read and write, go to school, went to elementary school, middle school, high school. And life wasn't, it's a totalitarian regime for people who don't understand or never studied Iranian history or Middle Eastern history. There really isn't. All those regimes in the region, they're authoritarian, and there really is one democracy in that area, and that's, the state of Israel.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so,
let's explain to everyone, AJ. We do have a lot of younger listeners out there, and by the way, thank you so much, Randy. I know you're listening out there, and to all my friends who are listening tonight, and it's great to be back after being gone for a couple of weeks. Let's explain to everybody that back in what was it? When did the Ayatollah overthrow the Shah?
Well, it was 79, really.
Yeah.
So, 79.
The Shah of Iran ran the country. He was someone that the United States put into power, which, even though you've heard, all of you out there, about the $4 billion of ransom that was sent over to Iran recently, that was all part of a deal that arms were purchased by the Shah. They were never delivered. We kept the money, and now we returned it. A lot of people want to say it was ransom for prisoners, and it may very well have been, or at least that's how it looked to be. I don't know. I'm not part of the State Department, and I can't really speak to that. But the Ayatollah Khomeini, when he became powerful, was a very sadistic, repressive. Would you say, AJ, he was probably as backwards as it gets as far as world affairs are concerned? Yet he was extremely shrewd in what he did. The Shah fled to the United States, and suddenly you were living in a hellhole for all intents practical purposes.
That's true. Actually, you got the story quite right. Back in 1953, there was a military coup d'etat. What happened was the Shah was ousted by back then Prime Minister Mossad, who ended up nationalizing what was called I believe it was called the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which is today called the British Petroleum.
Mm-hmm.
And they were taking Iranian resources, Iranian oil and gas, and they're getting pennies on the dollar to the Iranian people, Iranian government. So Mossad did, and a lot of Iranian people realized it's a raw deal. We got the oil, and you're giving us, 8 cents, 10 cents on the dollar. So they ousted the Shah, they nationalized the oil company, oil industry, and the Brits were really ticked off about this. So MI6 was able to convince the U.S. government at the time to work closely with the Central Intelligence Agency to basically overthrow the Mossadegh government and bring back Shah. That has been a very sore subject for most Iranians. Most Middle Easterners hold a grudge, and they remember history going back 50, 100, 150 years. Unlike many Westerners, they do not have a short-term memory. They realize they study history, and they teach their kids, they teach their grandkids. So this was a really sore subject for Iranians. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, you had several different factions in 70, really when it started 76, 75, 76, things started going south. And because the Iranian economy also wasn't in bad shape, because oil all of a sudden went up and the prices weren't going down. Right. So besides, Shah was really stealing a lot of the money, oil money, basically using it for his lavish lifestyle, castles, and palaces, everything else.
Right.
Khomeini and the Islamic groups were able to be the most organized group out of everybody else. You had the communist group, you had the students who were Western educated, mainly like my father, but you had a lot of Iranian students in Germany, France,
You're breaking up, AJ. You're breaking up, AJ.
It has seemed is it better?
Yeah, a little bit. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. It has seen the Western democratic government. They wanted something like that installed in Iran instead of a authoritarian Shah or a king deciding every aspect of the government from A to Z. Well, unfortunately, the Islamic group, they had years of experience, they were organized, and it completely hijacked the revolution. And by the time people realized what had happened, it was too late.
Yeah.
One of the best things that happened for the regime was when Saddam attacked Iran, because right around September of 1980, when this happened, Iranians, there was something in the air. People realized that this is the wrong regime. They were duped. They were bamboozled. But Iraq ended up attacking Iran, and the dynamic completely changed because people said, well, wait a minute. We have an Arab nation who's attacking us. You know, we have something more important right now just to do instead of doing having another revolution and regime change. We need to defend our borders.
Yeah.
So, and Khomeini actually said this himself. He said Saddam attacking Iran was a gift from God because they knew exactly what had happened. For the next 8 years actually, 80 to 88, they kept people busy with the war. Hundreds of thousands of young men died, and in order for them to stay in power. In addition, back home, they were executing people. So anybody who was against the government, they would execute them. It doesn't matter which party you're, they would just say you're trying to overthrow the government, and you're committing seditious acts. They love that word, sedition, and they would just execute people. So that's the environment in which I grew up. From 1980 to about 89 is when I left Iran. And I had to get smuggled out of Iran because my dad is Iranian citizen. It didn't really matter if I was born in the U.S. The Iranian government claimed that I was an Iranian citizen. So when I was 16, I was a junior in high school, and I realized, well, my parents actually realized also, that I would have 2 more years of high school, then I would have 3 years of mandatory service in the regime, then I would have another 2 years where I would not be allowed to leave the country after my service was done. So I realized I would not be able to get out until I was in my early to mid 20s. That would be a lot of wasted time. You know, my youth would probably be wasted in a country where I was really miserable.
Well, before we get too far with your escape at the age of 16, I as I told you earlier today when we talked, I want to kind of go over some of the things that are currently going on in the Middle East right now, in Iran and Iraq. I was opposed to our invasion into Iraq. I said that would destabilize the entire region, regardless what you think of what's his name, who's no longer with us, who I won't mention, Saddam Hussein. He did stabilize the area. He kept terrorists out of the area. He kept, there was no such thing as ISIS. There was terrorism, but there was no such thing as ISIS or some of these other fractions that are over in the Middle East. But for everybody out there who's not really completely aware of it, would you please explain to folks the difference between a Shiite, a Sunni, and a Kurd, so maybe people will understand what's going on and why? And at the same time, two-part question: do you ever see a day when there is going to be total peace in the Middle East, that finally the arms will be laid to rest and they'll get along as brothers?
Wow. Well, let me take the second question first. Total peace in the Middle East. As much as I would like to see it, the problem is it's been going on for over 2,000 years, from Christian Crusades to, that whole region's been having a lot of problems, from the Byzantine Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Roman Empire, the Persians, the Mongols attacked and took over. So it's an intersection of several different, at least 3 different major religions. And they all want a piece of the pie, a piece of the land. Yeah. And they all claim that's their land. But the problem also is that there's so many different ethnic groups. So you said the Kurds.
Right.
Kurds are actually an ethnic group. So you have the majority of them are Sunni, but you do have a minority Shia group in there.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between Shia and Sunni Islam, Shias believe that, of course, there's different sects within the Shia, but in general, the Iranian Shia and the majority of the Iraqi Shia, which is the second largest Shia population after Islam,
Mm-hmm.
they believe that after Prophet Muhammad, Ali, who was his cousin, was supposed to be the first imam. And after that, he had 11 disciples, with the 12th one will be the 12th imam will be resurrected along with Jesus and convert everybody to Islam. So that's what Shias believe. Sunnis believe that no, after Prophet Muhammad, there are only four: Abu Bakr, Umar, Osman, and Ali. And Ali is the last one. And after that, we don't have any imams. Everything else is hadith, and everything else is based on, the ulama, who are the elders who read and interpret Quran. The foundation of both religions is the same. They're both believing, Muhammad. They both believe in Hajj, attending, going to annual Hajj. Both believe in 5 prayers a day, fasting 1 month out of the year. But they're using their differences really to it's become political. I mean, they're using religion as political means to rule over people.
Yeah.
And that's true about ISIS. That is true about the mullahs in Iran. That's true. That was true about the Taliban in Afghanistan. That's true everywhere, really.
Mm-hmm. They take the religion and they corrupt it to whatever they want it to make it to be, in order to justify it in their own mind as to what they're doing by their rulers. It's sort of like what's going on now. I think it's in the city of Mosul, is it, that they're getting close now to taking it back from ISIS, and the ISIS soldiers are using the civilians as shields. So when the bombing is going on there, they're killing civilians along with ISIS members, which only shows you what kind of cowards these supposed fighters really are.
And later on, they also use that as propaganda. They see they're killing our civilians. They're not really killing soldiers. Right?
Yeah. Explain to people, a lot of people fear the Quran. And I've tried to tell people, and it's fallen on deaf ears to people that are just plain ignorant that I know, and supposedly educated people, that the Bible and the Quran are not that far apart as far as history is concerned, and the stories within the Bible. Many of the reenactments that are, and I don't mean to use that word frivolously, but many of the things that are written down in Scripture in the Bible are also written down in the Quran, and not that dissimilar from each other.
That's actually true, and that's actually also true about Torah and Talmud. So the 3 religions of book, what they call, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they're very similar. They have some subtle differences. So, like in Islam, they don't believe that Jesus is, Lord himself. They believe that Jesus was a prophet, and God impregnated Virgin Mary, and, Jesus is a prophet just like Muhammad or Moses.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some subtle differences, but the stories about Joseph, the stories about Adam and Eve, and Cain and Abel, all those stories are practically all the same.
Mm-hmm.
And this is this is truly sad part, because we can talk about it. For work, I just had to visit Israel, and it is a beautiful country, so much history. I mean, everywhere you walk, you can imagine, Jesus walking there 2,000 years ago. And
yes.
So many different empires, the Byzantine and the Ottomans and the Romans and the Persians, so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad that people just can't get along and just put those differences aside.
Mm-hmm.
And it is true that in Islam, unfortunately, right now, they're using religion as means for political ends in many countries. So, for instance, Iran and Saudi Arabia are the only two countries that women have to wear hijab mandatory hijab. Now, interestingly enough, in Quran, there is nowhere that says women need to be covered head to toe. It just states in several different places women need to look decent.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say a woman can't walk out with a tank top and short shorts, but it never says they need to be covered head to toe and you can't see anything but eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, hot summer day, covered head to toe in black. That's something that the governments are using in order to belittle women, in order to control women, in order to take away women's rights. And, you know, it's basically a means they're using religion as a political means to control people.
Let me ask you something, AJ. For people out there who don't understand, and I'm not completely sure I understand it 100% either, no one wants to live under Sharia law. But from what I understand about the Muslim religion, and I'm not an expert by any hell, I'm not even an expert on the Christian religion, to tell you the truth, even though I certainly have read the Bible. But Sharia law is not a death sentence for anyone. I mean, no one wants to live under it. But explain to people out there what Sharia law is.
Well, Sharia law is the strict interpretation of the Quran, and most, let's put it this way, there are a lot of countries, even within the Muslim nations, they're rejecting it. So let's say most Iranians are very secular.
Mm-hmm.
Even the religious families, but after what happened after 79, after the religious leaders ruling Iran for almost 4 decades now, people are really sick and tired of religion. So it's actually backfired, because what's happened is people's rights have been taken away, and they've used, you know, Islam as a way to control people. So people they resent religion, they resent Islam. A lot of Iranians are turning to Sufism. Mm-hmm. They convert to other religions like Christianity. You have a large enough Baha'i population in Iran, which is a completely different religion. And you have so many Iranians who are basically agnostics, or if you ask them, they'll say, yeah, I'm a Muslim, but, you know, they won't practice anything. And, for all practical purposes, they don't go to the mosque, they don't pray, they don't fast, they'll drink all day long and do nothing. So this is backfired. But Sharia law is only implemented really in very small little places, like in Pakistan to some degree, in Saudi Arabia to some degree, but most Arab countries, there was no Sharia law. This is, you have a fanatic sect or sector of the religion who want to implement that. Even within Western countries, when they're talking about it, so my parents are immigrants, and as you know about my story now, and then my book. But
which by the way, I just want to remind everybody, we're talking to AJ, who is a American-born of Iranian descent. He's written a wonderful book, which we're going to get to in just a couple of minutes, Twice Under the Persian Sky. And the reason for twice will be shortly explained. This is the story of a 16-year-old boy leaving the post-Islamic revolutionary Iran in the 1980s, and he has a unique problem fleeing the Ayatollah Khomeini and all that goes on in Iran. It was a repressive regime. I'm sure there were many, many people that suddenly one day were there and the next day they disappeared. But it seems as though the political right in this country likes to use the term, well, we're not going to be under Sharia law, and I've been saying for a very long time, AJ, I doubt seriously it's ever going to get to that point. They're so scared that all Muslims, all they want to do is bring an end to Christianity and bring it in. And I keep saying these are the bastard organizations of the Muslim religion. These are the people that corrupt because they're bad to begin with and they're corrupt to begin with, so they change it around. I don't ever see the day when Sharia law will permeate the world. I don't ever see the day when the Muslim religion will be any stronger than what it is at the moment. Maybe a few more followers here or there, but certainly Christianity, Judaism, Muslim, Buddhism, etc., will probably still be the main religions of the world. Do you see it any different?
No, I mean, I don't see Sharia law implemented in the U.S. on a large scale. At most, and in, let's say, worst case scenario, it could be implemented in small Arab and ultra-religious communities, let's say Dearborn, Michigan, or other places where you have a large Muslim population. But I don't really see Sharia law being implemented superseding, let's say, U.S. civil law or criminal laws, because I just don't think people will go for something like that. That would be unconstitutional. I mean, that just, it doesn't even make any sense.
No, and I don't see Texas ever going that way.
No, I mean, I don't think a lot of others, many of the other states won't go that way either. I mean, even the blue states, I don't think they'll go that way.
You know, was the biggest joke over this last 8 years of Obama's administration was that they claimed he was a Muslim, and they claimed he was ready to put this country into Sharia law. If you take a look at the man and you take a look at his family and you take a look at the things he does, nothing points to him being a Muslim. Nothing points to Sharia law. I just think the right loves to use anything they can to try to come up with an advantage, a.k.a. the point where is Hillary Clinton fit? Well, I don't know about morally fit, but is she physically and mentally fit to run this country, because she stumbled a few times, and a few years ago, I guess she had I know she had a concussion. I mean, they use anything that they can to get an upper hand in the political arena. I want to ask you this question, then we're going to get on to the book, because this is just sitting next to me here, and I want to get to it as soon as possible. Right now, many Middle Eastern countries, including Iran, are vying to become the center point, or the head of the region, as far as the country that everybody looks to for all its wisdom and all its power. Do you see a few years down the line that Iran will be even a bigger player in the Middle East than they are at the moment, maybe superseding Saudi Arabia as far as a power is concerned in the area? Syria, I don't know what's going to happen there. Assad has to go. But it doesn't seem like anything is going to happen in the immediate future because of his relationship with Russia. But do you see Iran becoming even more of a bigger power player there than they've been in the past?
Yes, and I think, unfortunately, we have expedited this process and enabled them to do this through our policies, foreign policies. One of the things you mentioned is removing Saddam Hussein when we first started talking. Mm-hmm. Saddam was sort of a check for the Iranian government. And once we removed that obstacle, they became emboldened, they became presumptuous, and they thought, okay, well, now we're a regional power. The only serious threat we had was our neighbors to the west, and he's removed now, and who's going to, there's nobody else. Mm-hmm. So, and Iran has been able to make, over the last especially two decades, have really good relations with China and Russia. And they have been able to help them out both on advising and selling them military equipment. Iran also has good relations with North Korea now for several years. So, yes, I think, unfortunately, some of our foreign policy has enabled them to become the regional power. And, of course, with the nuclear deal now, the sanctions are getting lifted gradually. Mm-hmm. They'll have more access to the open markets. And, ironically, they will not deal with the U.S. in most cases. Mm-hmm. They will deal with certain European countries and mostly Asia. Everything is moving east, really. So they're dealing with either neighbors to the north or Asians Asian countries.
You just came back from a trip not long ago to the Middle East. You were in Israel, as you said. And one final question before we kind of move on here a little bit. And this is a question we spoke about yesterday. Does it make a difference to the different countries over there who becomes president of the United States, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton?
Yes, and I was really surprised when I asked people. One of the things I always like to do is talk to people, engage them in different conversations, and try to, learn about their culture and thought process as far as, as soon as you tell them, well, I'm American, they like to talk to you about different things. Oh, yeah, we like Western movies, or they'll talk to you about politics or the economy. And one of the things I was surprised is when in Israel, when I talked to, I would say 8 out of 10 Israelis, so like Jewish Israelis,
Mm-hmm.
they would tell me, oh, we like Trump. And I would ask them, well, why? And they look at it from their own national security perspective. They saw, the explanation they gave me was the last 8 years with Obama, and specifically the first 4 years where Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State,
Mm-hmm.
they blamed the administration, Hillary, for the breakdown of Syria, which is, next door.
Mm-hmm.
Egypt, which Muslim Brotherhood took over, but then the military, changed the regime again.
Mm-hmm.
But Muslim Brotherhood is still very active.
Right.
ISIS now has access to the Gaza Strip, so that's right next to Israel. They're
Mm-hmm.
really worried about that. And other places also, like Libya, ISIS is training in Libya. Yemen, you have the Houthis and other groups that are
Mm-hmm.
training. Some are Iranian supported.
Mm-hmm.
And to the north, you have the Lebanese and the Hezbollah. And Iranians now, with access to more cash, they're also funding Hezbollah more so. Actually, I got to visit the Israeli-Lebanese border, and I took several pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Israelis have something called the Eye of Israel. It's a huge tower on the top of a huge hill, probably about 100 yards from the Israeli-Lebanese border. And I asked one of the guys, IDF guys, and he said, we can see within 60 miles, because we have huge, powerful telescopes on there, 60 miles within Lebanon. And, of course, he didn't tell me this, but I saw all the radars and everything. I'm pretty sure they have signals intelligence, all other capabilities as well to pick up.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see about 500-600 yards on the other side where the UN forces are, because you have the Israeli border, a little section where, is no man land,
Mm-hmm.
probably, a few yards, and then the UN forces. You can see 4x4s, and those are the 4x4s that probably the Iranian government bought Hezbollah.
Mm-hmm.
So the Israelis are really worried about that. This is what they look at.
Mm-hmm.
When I talked to the Arabs were mortified of Trump. And they would say, no, Hillary Clinton is, the person we want, which is ironic because, looking at culture, looking at, the religion, you wouldn't think they would want a woman in power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting when you tell me that story that the Israelis, for the most part, want Trump, which makes no sense to me. If you're and I know you cannot comment really, but if you're an intelligent person, why you'd want Donald Trump is beyond me. And then the Arab nations, they want Hillary Clinton. So it's kind of a mixed bag. By the way, I just want to say this in my own personal observation: Benjamin Netanyahu has not made it any easier on the United States and Obama. The relations between Israel and this country have been kind of going in a downward slide long before Obama ever came along. It just seems to be that way. A lot of times. And a lot of times, and a lot of times, AJ, Israel has caused their own problems by not requiescing, not giving in a little bit, not give and take. They take some land that's theirs, they're not going to give it back. Sometimes you got to give and take and work with people.
Well, I will tell you my own personal story. There's a huge distrust. Actually, I'm writing a book about this. It's going to come out soon as well.
Oh, good.
When I got to Israel, even though my passport says, born in the U.S. and everything else, they looked at my last name and they profile immediately. And I understand that they're profiled because they have to, because, you know, it's a survival mechanism. They don't want their planes blown up. They don't want security.
Mm-hmm.
But even as an American citizen, I was questioning and research on open source, social media, and everything else. It took me about 4 hours to actually enter the country from customs.
Wow.
So, and given my background, of course, I was there on a different assignment. Part of the problem is, even when I was in Israel, there's a huge distrust between the Arabs and Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand there's a huge terrorism issue, security issue as well. But this two-state solution where you have Arabs in Gaza Strip and West Bank and everything's closed off and Israelis always live in fear, this is not a long-term solution. At some point, they either have to get along or they have to come up with a different solution, because 20, 30, 50 years from now, you know, something's going to have to happen. Something's going to have to give. You can't live in, you know, in sort of a, let's say, police state where there are cameras all over the place and people are scared of missile attacks, and somebody blowing up a bus.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is also a different side of the story that I understand. I understand both sides, really. Having visited Israel, I understand the Arab discussion on what they lack now, because at some point, 1 million Arabs were allowed into Israel every day from West Bank to work.
Mm-hmm.
I asked the Israelis, and they said that number has gone down to about 15,000.
Wow.
From 1 million, because of after the security issues and everything else.
Wow.
So that also creates a resentment on the other side, because they have no economic means to improve their lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just imagine what that leads to.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than you're not working, you're not making any money, and it just drives you absolutely crazy. We are talking to AJ, the author of Twice Under the Persian Sky. How can they get a hold of this book? Because I'm telling you, folks, if you really want to read a book about a young man at 16 years old who is by far more grown up than half of the people that run this country, and his daring escape, and as I said to him before, he's quite a young man, and I'm proud to call him friend. How can people get a hold of the book?
It's available on Amazon. You can get it in Kindle or soft.
It's a great book. It's a great book. I can't wait to get the new one. I can't wait for that to occur. Why did you decide to write this book, Twice Under the Persian Sky?
Well, I wanted to tell my story. I actually have been wanting to tell my story for a long time. And what ended up happening is, you become complacent after you've lived here for a long time. Mm-hmm. You kind of start forgetting the bad memories, and those are compartmentalized. And in 2007, I was sent to Afghanistan. And when I was there, Afghan culture is not too dissimilar from the Iranian culture. Mm-hmm. And they speak the same Farsi language. It's a different dialect. Of course, it's Dari. Some words are different. It's almost like American English and with the Australian English.
Yeah.
But I looked at, talking to people and just going to different places in Afghanistan, and kind of brought back a lot of memories. And at that point, when I came back, I'm like, I have to sit down and write it. And even then, when I came back, I didn't think so, but my wife said, I had suffered from PTSD for a while, for several months after I got back. But eventually I started writing, a few pages here and there, and it took me a while, but I ended up finishing the book. And I had a good friend of mine, a couple of friends edited the book, and
yeah,
one of them didn't even know my story after all these years, and I hadn't shared my story with him. He was very amazed at that. I noticed a couple of things about it.
Right. I want to read from the forward of this book, and I want you to comment on it. A facade of normalcy seems to exist throughout Iran, but in the reality, Iranians struggle to find something that is a shadow of true normalcy. The way people dress, act, and speak in public is completely different from the way they behave behind closed doors. And then you also write in here, hope was the only thing that allowed me to survive in Iran for 10 years. My hope grew that one day I would be able to escape Iran and be free at last. One day my hope would be realized and I would be free from oppression, free to practice or not practice a religion, and free for a theocratical regime that misconstrued almost every aspect of life. How many people in Iran feel the way you do by those statements? Would you say about 85%?
Oh, yeah, I would say about 85 to 90%. The regime, the true followers of the regime are probably no more than 5 to 10% of the population. And the problem is that they have all the guns. They have all the power. One of the worst mistakes the U.S. government made was in 2009 when there was an uprising, the Green Movement, which initially was because of rigged presidential elections. But after the movement took off, within a few days, people wanted regime change. They were shouting, death to Khomeini and his son and his family. They just wanted the supreme leader gone. They just didn't want the regime anymore. And they suppressed that movement big time, and nobody, they had signs. I was watching this very closely and following social media. People were holding signs in English for the world to see, we need help. And the West did not intervene, unfortunately. Like I say, when we have bad foreign policy, we intervene in places and at times when we shouldn't, and then we don't intervene when we should. And that was put down. People's hopes were shattered, but like I said, about 85 to 90% of people feel that way. There's you have moral police in Iran, morality police. So they just walk around. They're on bikes, they're on motorcycles, they're on 4x4s, Land Rovers, and they just scout the area. If you're a girl, young girl, or it doesn't matter, a woman of any age, if your sleeve is a little too short, they'll come out and have a talk with you. And if it's really bad, let's say you're wearing tight jeans, then they even take you to the station, and you might get a beating. Nobody knows. If you're a guy and you have your hair a little longer than it should be, they'll embarrass you and humiliate you in front of people and shave it.
Let's talk a little bit about your escape itself. At the age of 6, you and your parents got together along with your friends and family members, and you decided you were going to escape. It took 10 years to put this into place. And it's a fascinating story. I got to tell you, this is a fascinating story. Twice Under the Persian Sky by AJ. Why did it take 10 years?
Well, it didn't really take 10 years to plan it, but it took 10 years for me to live in Iran. And at the end of the 10 years, my parents realized this is not going to work. I mean, we're not really living. We're getting by day in fear. Can't say what's on your mind. Can't dress the way you want to outside in public. And you have very limited options as far as your future life. This was true in my case. This was true in the rest of my family, my sister, and and my parents. So it took probably a good year or two to plan the actual escape from the time I was 14, because you have to find the right smugglers. We had heard stories where people, there are a few ways you could have smuggled out of Iran back when I was there. One was through Turkey, where people would hide in big tractor trailers underneath, let's say, vegetables, or it was really bad. And the way the Iranian custom they would get these long sticks. They're really hot, long sticks, and they would stick it right through all the way in different spots. And we had heard stories where sticks would go in people's legs and their backs. I mean, you're paralyzed for life. Just to try to, these are the this is what people did in order to escape and just to be free. And people take freedom for granted out west, Western countries in the U.S., but freedom is truly not free. You have to really appreciate being free. The other part was Pakistan. Pakistan was a really rough desert climate going through the province of Sistan Balochistan. But the other problem, going out of Pakistan, you had a lot of narcotics dealers and drug dealers who used that route. So you don't want to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So my only option was really down south. I figured I'd hit the Persian Gulf, and we had to find somebody we could trust. It was a friend of the family, a friend of another friend, close friend of my dad. And they were nice enough, and unfortunately, 2 years later, I heard that while they were smuggling somebody out of the country, he had a few grams of opium on him. And when they got close to the UAE Coast Guard, when they searched them, they found opium, and they blamed the smugglers as well. So they all got some jail time. And I really feel bad for that because they were truly, good guys.
Yeah, they were.
People get out. Yeah,
they were. But briefly, talk about that first attempt, that first night. You got so far, and then you had to go back.
Yeah, so imagine you're 16 years old. Most kids in the U.S. or other places are probably thinking about their homecoming or getting ready to go out on a date or whatever. I was getting up 3 a.m, getting in a very small fishing boat with a whole bunch of goats, and getting in the water, push the boat. We had probably about a dozen goats in there. Push the boat in the water as far as it doesn't, so we can clear the bottom, and then jump in the boat. And we ended up, Iran claims that its maritime border is quite far out, when in fact it isn't. But again, it's become a regional power because where the Strait of Hormuz is in the Persian Gulf, you have Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, and Oman. None of them really have a strong enough navy like Iran, so Iran is allowed to, it gets away with bullying other nations. And we were, for all practical purposes, cleared out of Iranian waters. But unfortunately, the IRGC Navy, and the IRGC is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which Khomeini created after the revolution because he did not trust Shah's military, or what was left of Shah's military. He thought that they're still probably loyal to the Shah and would try to have a military coup and overthrow him. So they created, originally there was just a bunch of thugs and loved ones, and now they're actually quite well-trained and a force to be reckoned with. They have been like this for the last, 25, 30 years. So that first night, we got caught. Unfortunately, if we had gone through maybe another, 500 yards, maybe 1,000 yards, we would have been through international waters, but they caught us. Keep in mind, they have fast boats. They have the double-engine Yamaha or Mercury engines, motors on their boats, and fishing boats in Iran are not allowed to have an engine more powerful than, so many horsepower. But they caught up with us and jumped by. And I was 16, on the corner, and the captain and his mate were getting beaten up and kicked in the chest and thrown in the water. Fortunately, when it got to my turn, they spotted another boat, so they ended up leaving me alone. We had to go back, though, at that point, because we didn't have those, we didn't have enough fuel, and we had thrown away all our forged documents to get out of Iran in the water. So we had to go back and try again next night. And we did try next night.
And you actually made it to you actually made it the second night to where you wanted to be that night, and then eventually you made it into Dubai, which is what your destination was. But there you had some trouble, and I'm going to kind of speed this up a little bit so we can get to where you are today. But talk about that first night though in Dubai. You were in the hotel room, and Hamid and his friend informed you that they were looking for a little female companionship, which is what they did on a regular basis, smuggling things in and out of Dubai, and how that made you feel for a few minutes.
Well, I was actually shocked, to be honest, because here I was, girls or women, that was the last thing on my mind. And here they did this routinely. They did this every month. They would go back and forth, and they had their own routine. They stayed at the same hotels. And you had a lot of, I would say, call girls who were from Asian nations and India and other places, and they would pay for an entire night. And they said, well, we could split it. And I was 15, and, to be honest, I wasn't even active, sexually active by then. And that's not something that was on my mind. What I had on my mind was, how do this is stage one of my getting out and reaching freedom, reaching the United States. Stage two is what was on my mind, and I was really, so they talked to me, and they said, well, we can share, you can split it, and I'm like, no, I'm not interested. So I go out so they can have their privacy, come back in, and take a shower. Next thing you know, there are giggles under the sheets, and the girl was handcuffed to him because we kept saying, I asked the guy, I said, well, wait a minute, you're having her, and we don't trust her. I mean, I don't know her. What if she steals our money and everything else? And he said, look, she's not coming in.
You're breaking up there, AJ.
So his hand was, he held up his wrist, his arm, and his hand was handcuffed to her hand. So at 16, that was a very interesting sight.
Well, to speed it up even a little bit more, because I want to get to where you are today. Of course, you had a little bit of a problem in Chapter 8. You talk about that with the consulate, getting your papers in order to get on an airplane. You had to wire for more money from your mom and dad to get where you wanted to be. And eventually you got to the United States of America. And to tell you, we're talking to AJ, the author of Twice Under the Persian Sky. This is a fascinating book. You really need to get it. We're kind of moving along here quickly, although AJ is going to be back with us in a couple of months. But the bottom line is you were recruited at the age of 19 years old because you always wanted to work in the State Department. And that was your dream, to be work in the Foreign Service Office, which you are not at this present time working in. From what you told me, that's not exactly where your goal is for the moment. But you now work for one of the top premier intelligence agencies in this country. Everybody can kind of figure out who that is, I'm sure, without me going very far. But talk a little bit about that when you were first approached at the age of 19 years old. You were going to college in Washington, D.C., a town that I'm extremely familiar with, having been based there in the Air Force. Talk about your decision to join this organization.
Well, one day I used to bike ride from my home where I was staying with my uncle in Arlington, and the bike ride to University, which is right across Key Bridge. And one day, two guys approached me, and I didn't know at the time, but and people will know this from reading my book, from the time that I had actually escaped and gone to the U.S. consulate in Dubai and told them my story. That's when they had actually followed me and knew about where I was and how I gotten out. I guess they had followed my story. So they ended up approaching me and talking to me about a possible opportunity, serving my country, and I didn't know anything about that at the time. So one of them just gave me their card. I told my uncle that night, and he's like, "Well, that's kind of weird. That usually doesn't happen. People don't just approach you on the street and give you a job."
Yeah.
And so what was weird about it is they wanted to meet in the hotel, which later on I found out, a lot of the recruitment actually does happen in other places, not the actual office. So I really didn't want to work at that place at the time because I wanted to be a foreign service officer. The whole notion of, being and working in different embassies every 2 years and maybe fine dining with diplomats and dignitaries from other countries, that was really intriguing to me. And possibly even learning several different languages, being acclimated with different cultures. But I ended up getting persuaded to go a different route. And I've written that in my book, and people who read my book don't know that it took a long time for me to get persuaded, but eventually, they succeeded in persuading me to go a different route.
And that's kind of where you are today. You never did get with the Foreign Service, with the State Department. AJ, with the time that we've got left here, just a couple of minutes, what do you want people to take away from your book? What is it you want to impress upon them the most?
There are probably a couple of things. First and foremost is freedom. And people do crazy things just to be free and just for an opportunity to truly live. So I know we have a lot of immigration issues, and I want to be apolitical as possible and non-political. But that's people who cross the border from down south, or you see the Syrian refugees going to the west. This is what the people are after. They're after freedom. They're not coming to those countries or this country to pillage and ravish everything and destroy everything. They're after good work, send some money back home, have a nice lifestyle, and most importantly, really, to have a better future for their children.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think I've told you this in some of our conversations, personal conversations. Some of the issues that we have in Latin America and the Middle East, these are caused by us, the Western nations. And people don't realize this because a lot of people don't follow the foreign news or overseas issues, but it is truly what we do in different countries ends up affecting us in the long run.
Yeah.
So freedom is truly, the bottom line. I want everybody to read my story and understand that people do amazing things and put their lives in jeopardy and danger just for a chance at freedom.
Yeah. That's something that we take for granted in this country. We've been talking to AJ, the author of Twice Under the Persian Sky. Please find it. Go to your bookstore, order it, go online. You can find it on Amazon. It is an amazing story. I can't wait to get the next book, which I probably will before too long. This is the story of one of the most remarkable men I've ever had the pleasure to know and call friend, from a 16-year-old boy now to a man in his, well, we're not going to get into how old you are at the moment, but a young man who is truly a success in every way, shape, or form, and someone who had to fight for his freedom to be free, even though he was an American-born citizen. He had to fight like the Dickens to overcome some of the most biggest obstacles that anybody could ever possibly get over in order to be in this country and to be able to be free again and to enjoy it. So, AJ, I thank you very much for taking time to join us here on The Express. I know you're going to be back with us to talk more about this book and about your upcoming book. And again, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for having me.
All right. And I just want to say thank you to everybody out there for taking the time to be with us tonight here on The Express. And a reminder for you, just go on youtube.com and go to Gary Allen, The Express Interviews. You can hear this show coming the end of this week, as well as some of my other past shows. This Thursday night at 7 p.m., the show will rebroadcast on diversitybroadcastnetwork.com. That's our sister station with Miss Renee. Also go progressivevoices.com. You can hear some of my past shows. And if you're part of the tunein.com network, you can go in there, put TMV Cafe as your favorite, and you can listen to any of our past shows. I want to thank you all very much for taking the time to be with us here tonight. And I want to thank you all very, very much. And again, until next week, please take care of yourselves and each other.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.